This is Wednesday, the 24th of February. This is American history. Now, during World War I, many blacks from the South saw an opportunity to become part of the industry of the North. And many blacks are going to leave the farming communities and head to the big cities of the North. Because of discrimination, many blacks are going to begin to congregate together. They are going to become part of enclaves, that's what a sociologist would call this, as a way of support and as a way of protection. Probably one of the biggest black enclaves of the North would be Harlem. Most whites mistrusted blacks. Most whites mistrusted immigrants. Most whites mistrusted un-American ideas. It is because of this that the Ku Klux Klan began to make a comeback. Surprisingly, though, the Klan was strongest in the Midwest. Indiana would have the highest number of Klan members by the time we get to the mid-1920s. In 1920, it is time for a presidential election. The Republicans are going to choose Ohio Senator Warren Harding. Warren Harding is going to choose Calvin Coolidge, governor of Massachusetts, as his running mate. The Democrats are going to pick Ohio Governor James Cox. Cox is going to choose Secretary of the Navy Franklin Roosevelt as his running mate. Now, Roosevelt and Cox believed that the Treaty of Versailles should be adopted. Coolidge and Harding believed that it should not. So 1920 is more of a mandate. You can see in this election that the Democrats are the red states and the Republicans are the blue states. You can see that it's an easy victory in popular vote and an easy victory in electoral college vote for Warren Harding. Well, what do we know about Warren Harding? We know from the campaign that Warren Harding elected to reject the League of Nations. It had been Harding who had gone to see President Wilson in 1920 to ask him to drop the League of Nations. And when Wilson would not, it was Harding who spoke on the floor of the Senate why the treaty should be declared, why the treaty should not be adopted. Warren Harding had campaigned on the idea that he wanted America to return to the good old days. In his speeches, he said there needed to be a return to normalcy. Now, unfortunately, normalcy is not a word, so we're not exactly sure what he meant by this. Harding is considered one of the worst presidents of the United States. He's always rated at the very bottom. He's not the worst, but he's awfully close to being the worst. Now, Harding got in trouble because he wanted to have his cabinet run on its own. He didn't want to have to go to cabinet meetings and tell his cabinet members what to do. To that end, Warren Harding brought in some pretty good cabinet members. Andrew Mellon was appointed Secretary of the Treasury. Herbert Hoover was appointed Secretary of the Commerce. Charles Evans Hughes, who had run for president in 1960, is appointed to Secretary of State. Now, I got to tell you, you couldn't get any better than these three guys right here. But Harding is also going to bring with him what is called the Ohio Gang. These are men who Harding had been surrounded with ever since the get-go, who had allowed him to go higher and higher in office. Most of the Ohio Gang was interested in one thing only, and that was making money. Harding eventually learned of their deceit, but Harding could not bring himself to discipline these men, and in the end, it's going to cost him politically. Albert Fall had been appointed Secretary of the Interior. Now, during World War I, several oil deposits had been given over to the Navy as reserves in case the Navy ran out of oil. Well, we don't need the oil for the Navy anymore because we're not at war. So President Harding is going to transfer the oil reserves to the Department of Interior. Now at Teapot Dome, Wyoming, and Elk Hills, California, Fall is going to lease the mineral rights out to favorites who had given him bribes. Now this is all incredibly illegal, and when Fall is eventually discovered, Fall will be arrested, tried, and eventually thrown in jail. To my knowledge, I believe he is the first active cabinet member to be jailed while still a cabinet member. Harry Doherty had been appointed Attorney General. Some of Doherty's appointees were convicted of influence peddling, where they said to one lawyer, "If you give me money, I will see to it that you win the case." Doherty himself was forced to resign through a great deal of bad press. This video here talks about some of the shenanigans pulled during the Harding administration. Warren Harding was spared most of the knowledge of how deceitful his friends were because Harding died in his first term. Harding was in San Francisco, and in 1923 he died in his sleep. Here is a rundown on what Harding was like as president. Calvin Coolidge, who had been governor of the state of Massachusetts, will be sworn into office. Now, Calvin Coolidge's father was a federal judge. This is the first time that a father will swear in his son as President of the United States. Calvin Coolidge was just the exact opposite of Warren Harding. Coolidge was a hands-off manager. Coolidge believed that successful business leaders should not be held back by government. It is Coolidge who came up with the phrase, "The business of government is business." Calvin Coolidge was quite photogenic. He liked to wear different kind of hats. There's a famous picture of Calvin Coolidge in a war bonnet. Calvin Coolidge had only been president for just a few short months when the Republicans met, but they nominated him for a term onto his own. The Democrats were torn. There were a great number of Southern Democrats who wanted Bill McAdoo to get the nomination. McAdoo was Wilson's son-in-law. A great deal of Northern Democrats wanted Al Smith, the Catholic governor of New York, to get the nomination. The McAdoo people wouldn't support Smith, and the Smith people wouldn't support McAdoo, so the Democrats had to go looking for a dark horse. They went to John Davis, who was a lawyer in Washington, D.C., as somewhat of a compromise candidate. Well, there were many Democrats who were upset. The feeling was that Davis and Coolidge will bring the country back to the Gilded Age, that the progressive movement would die out. The Progressive Party decided to reinvigorate itself, and they chose Bob La Follette as their candidate. So in this election there are three candidates: Coolidge the Republican, Davis the Democrat, and La Follette the Progressive. Now of course the Democrats are divided between La Follette and Davis. You can see that it is a fairly easy victory for Coolidge. Coolidge is the blue state, Davis is the red state, and La Follette is the green state. You can see in the Electoral College that it is an easy victory for President Coolidge. Well, I'd like to wait tomorrow and talk about Coolidge prosperity, because that's going to take some time and we don't have any time left in class today. On Friday, I'd like to try to see if we can finish up. Please remember that if you have not turned in your papers that tell me who you're doing your project on, you need to turn them in. If you do not believe you're going to be at school between now and Friday, then email me the information so we can get it done.